It's movie night, and we're back with another review of one of my most anticipated films of the year, and that's Solo, a Star Wars story, starring Alden Erinhiech as Han Solo, Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, and of course we have Chewie in it, as well as another magnificent actor in Woody Harrelson, and I forget the girl who plays Kira in the movie, but we all know her as Khaleesi from Game of Thrones, and for some reason her name is slipping my mind right now, but I probably won't be talking about her all that much, so it really doesn't make a big difference for this review. To begin with, we're going to nerd out. I like talking about mostly characters, and the story gets fleshed out as we talk about each character. So let's hop right into it. My favorite character in this movie. A lot of people are going to go into it, I know, looking for Solo. That's why they're going. Solo, a Star Wars story. But I'll tell you who my favorite is. And you probably already know, if you've seen my channel in the past, you guys know how big of a Star Wars fan I am. I have my Millennium Falcon shirt on, wore it proudly to the film. The Millennium Falcon is by far my favorite starship of all time. That is the ship, if I could be on any vehicle, it's the Millennium Falcon. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But my favorite character was this guy, Lando Calrissian. I'm going to go ahead and take him out of the box. When I do the review, if I like a character that much, I'm going to go ahead and take him out the box. Donald Glover got this character, in my opinion. Now, I know a lot of people have been upset that he hasn't been in any Star Wars film since Return of the Jedi, where he once again flew the Millennium Falcon, originally his ship, and in that movie to blow up the second Death Star. And I appreciate it and love the fact that they not only went back and told a story about Han Solo, a young Han Solo, how he met with Chewbacca for the first time, but we got to see one of the classic characters who was one of the biggest heroes in the original trilogy, and that's Lando Calrissian. And that's this guy right here. Now, I'll tell you what. I love everything about what they did with this guy in the film. Mainly because of nothing else. It's because of who they got to play him. Donald Glover is a great actor to begin with, but you give me somebody who's not only a great actor, but he's going to be able to nail this guy in the film. I thought it was perfect. I thought they did a good job of not bringing him in too early. You had to wait for Lando, and the whole scenario between him and Han, and how Lando actually lost his ship to Han Solo. We knew that was going to be in the film. We knew the Kessel Run was going to be in the film. A lot of people speculated maybe we would see Boba Fett, Greedo. Luckily, we didn't see those characters, because if it's bad enough that Star Wars is on this trip to always want to go back in time and do films based on the early lives of some of the characters that we saw in the expanded universe. Major spoilers in this one. So if you haven't seen Solo, go ahead and see it. This is a spoiler review. When I say Galaxy class spoiler review, I mean it's a deep spoiler review. So going back in trying to rehash all these characters, I don't want to see Boba Fett in this movie. I know a lot of people did. I didn't want to see Jabba the Hutt. I didn't want to see Greedo. I didn't want to see a lot of the characters we saw in the original trilogy, or any characters we saw in the prequel trilogy so far, in The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi. I didn't want to see Maz Kanata in this film talking to Han Solo. I didn't want to see him meeting her for the first time. I didn't want to see anything from those two films in this movie. You want to see something fresh. You want new characters. You want new mythology based on it, sprinkled in with some stuff that we're familiar with. This felt like a Star Wars film to me, but at the same time, it is probably the least of all the films they made so far, or even Rogue One. This one felt least like Star Wars and most like it at the same time. It was strange. There were certain scenes, there were certain things that just felt perfect for this film. We haven't seen a film like this in the Star Wars saga so far. In all the films, we haven't seen a film like this. Just like Rogue One, when it came out at the time, we hadn't seen anything like Rogue One. Straight up war, really nailing the wars in Star Wars. So in this film, we get a straight up action adventure, and it felt a lot like the late 90s, early 2000s style of it. It had the adrenaline pumping in each scene, how long they're drawn out, had a very Spielberg quality to them, a Minority Report, things like that, where you had these big drawn out action sequences, Jurassic Park, things like that. It felt more along the lines of Jurassic Park, Minority Report, things like that, where Ready Player One. It felt like in that realm. Indiana Jones, that type of deal. Action adventure, classic action adventure, which is great because when I mentioned Indiana Jones, who played Indiana Jones? That would be Harrison Ford. Let's get into Alden Erinhiech. How did he do his Han Solo, in my opinion? From the moment he stepped on screen and said his opening lines, I was like, that's Han Solo. He does not act like Harrison Ford. In scenes, he looks almost eerily like him. But you can tell size-wise, they're not comparable. If you put Harrison Ford next to Alden, they are not the same type of person. They went as far as putting little details, even like the scar on his chin. That was in there. I love little nods like that. The cadence of how he talked popped up. It felt like Harrison Ford's interpretation of Han Solo. But Alden made it his own, where you got those Harrison Ford beats, but he's not trying to play Harrison Ford. He's playing Han Solo. Harrison Ford does not own Han Solo no more than he owns Indiana Jones. Han Solo is a character, just like Donald Glover, even though I feel like there's some things in it where I'm sure people can be like, that wasn't quite like Billy D. Williams. I love that. He's not playing Billy D. Williams. He's playing a young Lando Calrissian. And the Calrissian we saw in Empire Strikes Back has been through a lot. And a lot of changes have been made in his life. And he's, quote unquote, what he says, I'm respectable now. Doing something that he claimed he hated in this film, which is mining spice, basically just mining in general. So, I like that. They're not what we saw in the original trilogy. They haven't earned that yet. This Han Solo and this Lando Calrissian are figuring it out, and they'll get to where we saw. But I like that they had the liberty to be able to add their own flair to it. That youth, because anybody, I'm 38 years old. I look back at all the time when I was like 22. If I met that 22-year-old, I don't even know if we would like each other. I mean, I even listen to myself. I sound different. But the way that I talk, everything, the way that I walk, the way that I stand, everything is different than it was when I was. So that made sense. I like it. If he was a carbon copy of it, I think it would have been a parody or a documentary of Han Solo and Harrison Ford more than its own take. So I had no problem with that at all. The story itself, I loved it. I loved the fact that Han Solo started out as a guy literally running around on the streets of Corellia. And by the way, Coruscant is my favorite Star Wars planet, but I would have to say Corellia, when I used to read all the Legends books, which used to be canon, not now, all the films, if you don't know what that means, all the film story aspect of it is what is claimed to have happened. Anything on the books we used to read when we were young before the prequel trilogy came out, that's all considered just legends now. That's just made up stuff, and even though some of the stuff may make it into the films, all those old books aren't canon. Anything in these films is supposed to be canon. But if you've read any of the Han Solo stuff, anything Han Solo was in those Legends books, they picked and plucked so many things from that. And it was such good fan service to people who knew what to look for. There were so many things in here, like the Corellia, the Kelso run, the way him joining the Empire. People might think that's a stretch if you don't know that. He did. That's straight from Legends. I love that. I just absolutely love that. His relationship with Lando in Legends, I used to love that relationship. Lando is one of my favorite characters, not because of the films, but because of the books. Even though they're not canon anymore, there's a lot of things I saw in this Lando Calrissian that came from those Legends books. And I appreciate Ron Howard not stepping away and saying, I'm just going to do my own thing. One of the knocks on The Last Jedi is that Rian Johnson did step out and say he was going to do his own thing. And I think it worked for all the right reasons for that. But I think for this type of a film with Han Solo in it, you do need to try to, in some way, tip your hat to the people who are diehard fans. The people who are going to come see this film as true Star Wars fans. People who have like the word Jedi tattooed on their arm like I do. And I have a whole, that's a whole other thing. I have a whole, on my left thigh, I have a whole Star Wars line tattoo mosaic of just, I have to show you sometime. But true Star Wars fans like me, when you're going to the point where you're tattooing your body, we like that little bit of fan service, and it means a lot to us. I don't have to have it, but it makes me feel like they appreciate us more than I think a lot of people give them credit for. because they do look out for people who still were heavily influenced with these characters from the Legends books, not so much canon with the films. So let's also get into, as I drink a beer, hope you don't mind. It was that good. Kira. Again, her name is slipping my mind. I don't know why, but I'll put a link in the description if you want to know her name, who played Kira. The reason why it slipped my mind, because she will always be Khaleesi to me from Game of Thrones, which is funny because talk about pop figures. I actually have her, Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. She's my favorite character from that one, along with Tyrion Lannister. But I have her. So the girl who played this girl, the Queen of Dragons. I'm gonna make a mess. So I'm just gonna leave that there, right there. By the way, this is again Star Wars. Got Jabba back here. Got we'll talk about this guy here in a moment, Darth Maul. But I liked her character. There was some early talk that she wasn't very good in the film. A lot of people think she's outside of Game of Thrones. She's not a very good actress. Actually, found her to be fine in this movie. I thought she was perfect. I didn't have any problems with it. I bought everything she said. I bought the chemistry between her and Han. We knew that it wasn't going to end well because she's not even mentioned in A New Hope by the time we see Han and Chewie together, New Hope. But let's get to Chewie. Chewbacca has always been one of my favorite Star Wars characters. He's probably been my top 15, top 10 favorite Star Wars characters, only because of that dynamic between him, Han, and Lando. And I just kind of look at them as a little a trio of characters. And we always wanted to know, how did Han Solo meet Chewbacca? And I thought they did a great job in this. Now, I always, again, from Legends, we always knew that we were thinking maybe that Han Solo was going to help free Chewbacca from slavery from Kashyyyk, because we know that the Empire was basically going down to Kashyyyk and enslaving the Wookiees, and Chewbacca wanted to help, which is in the film. We do get to see a scene, again, a nod to the Legends novels and all that what used to be canon made it into this film, and we get to see him help liberate some Wookiees. But at the same time, stay loyal to Han Solo without having a life debt. One of the things that was in some of the expanded universe of Star Wars was that the only reason why Chewbacca is with Han Solo is because of the life debt. And in a way, once you get all the way up to The Force Awakens where Han Solo is killed and Chewbacca is left alone without his friend, and a lot of people speculate, well, maybe he's free now. He can leave. He doesn't have the life debt. And I used to question, I'm like, they never say in these films that he had a life debt to Chewbacca. That's something that came from Legends and stuff that, we see in video games where we know that Wookiees will, if you save their life in any type of way, they're gonna be with you for life. They will self-impose a life debt with that person. We didn't get that in this movie, which means they're just bona fide friends. Chewie's there because he wants to be there. He's not there because he has some silly life debt to Han Solo, which Han Solo wouldn't have taken a life debt to begin with. You see in the film that Han Solo, there is a scene where Chewie was like, I'm going to go save my people. I'm out. And Han was like, hey, hopefully I see you again. And the reason why the life debt is not in there is because Han didn't save Chewie, like in Legends, where they say, he pulled Chewbacca away from the oppression of the Empire on Kashyyyk. Chewie's the one who saved Han. So if anybody owed a life debt to the other person in this film, it was Han to Chewie, not the other way around. And I love that. It says right there, Chewie's there because he wants to be. These guys are great friends. This is a buddy movie, and enjoy the ride. I love that. Woody Harrelson as Beckett, loved him in this movie, to the point where he actually fooled me at the end of the movie. As soon as he says, hey, I'll meet you on Tatooine, you're thinking, oh, okay, so we might see the Greedo scene in this movie. And you realize that Beckett, the big lesson he's trying to teach Han Solo is don't trust anybody, especially the ones you think you should trust the most. Because you're going to get screwed over. And it happens when he trusts Kira. She leaves him at the end. We'll talk about that scene in a minute. He trusts Beckett. He's gone, and he betrays him. And it's back and forth. He trusts Lando. Lando fucking leaves him down there. And so I like that aspect. So you can, again, shaping and molding the character of Han Solo. So by the time we see him for the first time in A New Hope, you've seen all this. You know, okay, that's why he doesn't trust anybody. That's why he doesn't want to help the rebellion. That's why he wants to be off on his own. And it all stems from the experiences of this film. Again, Ron Howard makes those beats happen perfectly in the film. I love that about it, this film, because it makes so much sense. So let's get into the big heist. You know, getting, you know, spice mining and getting your hands on hyperfuel is like gold in this, platinum is diamonds in the Star Wars universe. And people do oppress others in mining this stuff. And the stronger your force is, you know, that's why they had Wookiees on the planet mining this stuff. And long story short, I love the aspect of having this source, this hyperfuel, motivating all these different factions to want to get their hands on it because it's so valuable. And it translates not only into something usable, but you can also sell it at a high price. So it makes everybody, including the Empire, including the Rebels, all want a piece of this. All the factions, the swoop gang that was in the film that end up to be rebels, all works out perfectly. The Rebel influence in this movie had a bigger impact to me than the Empire. The Empire, I thought, was going to be much more heavily used in this film, and it wasn't. Pleasantly, it wasn't. We never got to see the Empire's point of view in Han Solo's story. It's strictly through his point of view. I love that. Rogue One, obviously, that's a little different. But in here, we don't. We just get his point of view, which leads to more of the Rebel point of view, because going into the third act, you find out that the Swoop Gang is actually, they're trying to get their hands on this stuff, not to sell it, but to use it, because these bandits, these people who are chasing after Han Solo and Beckett to help get their hands on the hyperfuel that they were trying to steal, you realize, oh, what that Swoop Gang was not an actual faction of like baddies just trying to sell something. They were rebels. They were the beginning of the rebels. These are people who are trying to get resources to fight back against the oppression of the Empire. And I love that. That was perfect. When she takes off her mask, it's just a kid, a young kid, and they're like, we're not using this for what you think. We don't want the money. We need this because we're starting a rebellion, and you would help us. And in a way, because of the story, even though Han Solo in A New Hope refused to help, towards the end, he did come back in Millennium Falcon to help at the Death Star run, but he didn't want any part of it. It's funny to see that he actually helped initiate the rebels to begin with how much of the hyperfuel that he managed to have to give to them. She thanked him. He was like, you have contributed to the rebellion, even though you don't want to be a part of it and you didn't do it on purpose. It was accidental. And you still, so Han has been contributing to the rebellion all the way up into his death. And whether he wanted to or not, no matter how much he ran, he just keeps ending up with the rebels. And I love that. I thought the movie was played perfectly. We didn't have any huge big cameos like Jabba the Hutt and Greedo and Boba Fett. Boba Fett is most likely getting his own film, so it was good not to see that. Another great thing about the movie that I liked was the non-presence of Force users. Rogue One did it very well. We did have Darth Vader in the film, and we did have the classic ending hallway scene where Darth Vader was just screwing up some fools all up in that hallway. By far my favorite scene of the film. In this film, we have a bit of an equivalent to that, where I thought we were going to make it out of the film. We would not see a lightsaber get sparked, and we would not see anybody use a Force user. We would not see any use of the Force. Not a word mention of it at all in this movie. Until the Darth Maul scene. Kira is talking to a cloaked figure, and I sat there listening. I'm like, that guy sounds like Darth Maul. He's sitting in a chair, cloaked up. I'm thinking, man, he sounds like Darth Maul. And then my son, who I went to go see with, he says, Dad, that's Darth Maul. And I was like, no, that can't be Darth. And then he pulls the hood back, and before he can do it, I'm like, wait a minute. I forgot that Darth Maul was in the Clone Wars. I didn't forget that so much as I have not. I've only gone through seasons 1 and 2 of Rebels. And I know he's in Rebels to the point where he's a significant character. And I thought, well, this makes perfect sense. Because they want to tie all that in. If you got the beginning of the rebellion, the rebels are the beginning of the rebellion in the show. I mean, it's all forming together. I'm like, well, that would make perfect sense. So as soon as he pulled the hood back, I was cool with it. It was Ray Park, the guy who played Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace. It was great to see him on screen again. And initially, I thought she was looking, before he took the hood off, I was thinking, well, maybe it's Darth Maul, but it's just some kind of a message from when he was alive, or in between Clone Wars, something like that. He sent a message and she just happened to have her hands on it, but she was communicating with him, and I love that. It was actually Darth Maul. He sparks lightsaber, uses the Force. It's him. Loved it. After all these years where they killed off Darth Maul in a Phantom Menace like that, you know, we were happy to have him back in the animated series, you know, in Clone Wars and in Rebels, but it was nice to see him physically on screen in a live action movie. It makes that scene in Phantom Menace feel a little bit better. You know, that movie came out in 99. I mean, now you can take a breath. He's finally back in a live action film. And I thought it was perfect. It was a perfect character to put in this movie. If you were going to do a cameo, that was the one. You got that one scene. He didn't kill anybody. He was just there. It was nice to see Darth Maul. He's in the universe. He's in the live action films, and we will be seeing him again. Most likely in the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. Hopefully, you know, we'll see that. And even though we have seen that in Rebels. So, but again, depending on time-wise, we might actually see him in the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. We have to see. But I love that aspect of it. But that's all we needed. I'm glad we didn't hear a lot about the Force and everything. Because even in Rogue One, there was a lot of talk of the Force. Because you had the Guardians of the Whills was there. And, you know, so there was a lot of Force talk. Darth Vader was there. So it's still, even though it wasn't based on Jedi, the Force, the Rogue One was still heavily influenced by Force talk and, you know, the Whills and things like that. Where this film, none of that. And it works just fine. It works great. You just focus on all the outskirts stuff that's happening in the universe. It's not always about light and dark Force users. It's a, you know, Star Wars is a huge universe. There's a lot of things going on, and it's good to see them cover that aspect of it. So, to recap, I love the film. It's not perfect. There are some things in there where it slows down a little bit and drags in spots with dialogue, and there's probably a couple scenes here and there you could have just cut out and just to keep the story moving a little bit, because there are a couple of dry spots in there. Paul Bettany as the villain, he was okay. I actually liked him. He had a slimy 1950s 60s feel to him, you know. But it was kind of a cliche villain. He's definitely not one of the, but he's not Krennic, you know, who I thought was an unbelievably good villain in Rogue One. But Paul Bettany did his job with that character. I didn't dislike it. You felt the weight of him. You felt like, but you also kind of feel like he not that he was. It's just the way he's written. It just felt so cliche, like Bond villain type of deal. You know, it didn't feel quite like a Star Wars villain. It felt like a Bond villain. But again, that's kind of why I like the movie, because we got to see we haven't had a Bond type villain in a film like this. So it was nice to have something like that in there. It's just, I thought execution wise to make it all pay off, it didn't quite have the payoff at the end, to the point where I was like, I hope they don't kill Paul Bettany's character in this film. You know, I was like, maybe they'll save him from another one, because there are talks that if Solo does well, they're going to make a franchise out of Solo, meaning he'll be 2 more films after this one, 2 more Han Solo films, and maybe we'll see him in those. But since we don't know, we'll see what the box office is going to do. The theater was packed. I was at. People were, I mean, it got a standing ovation at the end of the movie. I applauded. Me and my son both applauded when the credits ran out. The score in this movie is one of my favorite Star Wars scores, period. The Millennium Falcon was perfect. Again, that was my girl. I love that ship. I love the back and forth with Han and Lando. Even having a reference to why Lando calls Han in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. We find out why that is, why he mispronouncing his name. And that even, that's resolved. Because you used to always bug me. Why does Lando call Han? And you find out in this movie why it does it, and then it makes perfect sense. Oh, okay. And it just kind of sticks. It's a bit of a stretch, but I'll buy it. Looking back on it, Billy D. Williams was just mispronouncing his name wrong, and they just never fixed it. That's pretty much all it was. But I like the reason. I mean, if you're going to make it canon, and that's why he was calling him Han, I like it. I don't have a problem with it at all. Let's talk about the robot here real quick. L3. She was a bit of annoying to me in some of the scenes. I'm not going to lie to you about that. When she died, I was kind of relieved. She was getting almost Jar Jar Binksy to me in some of the scenes where she was coming. The jokes weren't quite landing with her. I have to see the film again and put it in context with her, but she was a bit over the top in some of the scenes, and some of the jokes just weren't timed, I think, perfectly. And when you look at someone like in K2 and Rogue One, played by Alan Tudyk, that worked out awesome. The way he bantered back and forth with everyone in the crew that he was working with. This one, it felt a little weird. There was this whole I really don't even want to talk about it, but I'll quickly glaze over it. That there was a report that Lando is actually pansexual, and he always has been. Who cares if he was or not, right? It really doesn't make a difference in his character, but we do find out in this movie that he is actually in love with this robot, and this robot's in love with him. They have kind of like this weird, there is a reference that he actually has like done it with this robot, so that was a little strange, but it doesn't diminish the character of Lando at all to me, because Lando never said he wasn't pansexual, so who gives a shit, right? So, and again, he's still one of my favorite characters to begin with. So, I personally, it's not a perfect film. I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. If I was doing a 5-star rating, I'd definitely give it 2 thumbs up. I'd highly recommend it. It's a great action summer blockbuster film. If you took the name Star Wars off of it, it still works as its own film, without any force uses or anything like that. It felt like a nice Steven Spielberg directed film back in the late 90s, the 80s style. It just has its own unique style that has a timeless feel to it. You can be able to watch this movie 50 years from now, and it'll be just as good as it was when you watched it in this one. It just has so many things going on in it. It's hard to just kind of cram it all into a review, because there were so many things in it. My son asked me right afterwards, Dad, what was your favorite scene? And normally I'm like, my favorite scene is this. It took me a while to think, what was my favorite scene? And to end the review, I'll talk about my favorite scene. My favorite scene in the movie is when Han Solo is told by Lando, go ahead, get in the cockpit, fly it. And for the first time in a dangerous situation, he's not just taking it for a test drive. Han immediately is in this ship, flying it for the first time in danger and flying the hell of it. And to have him there, and then Chewbacca sits down and you see it for the first time, and it actually play the music from Empire Strikes Back when they were in the asteroid field, which is one of my favorite Star Wars cues in all the films. To see that it came all together, I loved it. It was perfect. That's by far my favorite film. Favorite scene in the film was when Lando basically you say, go ahead and fly it, and Han takes it out, Chewie sits down, and they pilot it together for the first time, and they do the Kessel Run, and that was the big thing that obviously in A New Hope, just like how fast he did the Kessel Run. We actually got to see the Kessel Run in this film, so that's the Kessel Run basically is my favorite part of the movie. I highly recommend you guys go see it if you haven't seen it already. I can go on about this movie probably 2 hours if I wanted to. It's just so much in it to talk about. But I might do a longer review of this one later, like a super. But I think for all intents and purposes, it's just one of those films where I think everybody's going to have fun watching it for different reasons. And I think that's why the film works for me. That it's just a fun movie that doesn't take itself too seriously and has all the beats of a summer blockbuster. But you're in a Star Wars universe. And again, to see characters like Lando in there, and Darth Maul and things like that. I mean, it's packaged so great, and have a director on board with Ron Howard and Kasdan, who wrote Empire Strikes Back, which is my favorite Star Wars film, wrote this film. You could feel it in there. It felt like Star Wars, but it was also unique, just like the Empire Strikes Back was. So that'll do it for this one. I'll see you guys on the next movie review. Until then, be you, be genuine, be safe. See you guys next time. Take care.